everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great to be here. I've been at this conference a couple of times. Always really enjoy it, always really get a lot of energy from it, and I love the community as well. It's quite unusual to find a sector-based community where everybody just seems to get on and share information. So really nice to be here. What I'd like to talk to you about is, I suppose, one of the big challenges that we have at the moment, which is really, it's quite an existentialist one. Sorry to throw a bit of philosophy at you at this time of the morning. But it really is about what we are as service management people. What does it really mean to be somebody who works in service management? And I don't just mean IT service management or IT or being an ITIL badge person or any other badge person. I mean those of you, all of you here who deliver technology-based services to support the organizations that you work for. Can I ask a quick question? Just shout out anybody. How do you describe yourself? If you're at a dinner party or you meet somebody for the first time and they say, yeah, I'm an accountant. What do you say? Anybody? Sally. An IT manager. And what's the follow-up question to that from them? Is it, can you fix... Yeah, exactly. Can you fix my PC? Or are you, beyond that now? Does anybody here try and actually come up with an answer that tries to explain what service management is? I once worked with a group of people, I used to do music, and one of the groups I played in, they couldn't get it at all. And one or two of them, as a joke one day, said, I think actually Barclay's a spy. And I was doing some work, so happened I was doing some work at GCHQ at the time, which didn't help. And they were like, that's confirmed it for sure. And I just let them go because it was too difficult to explain. It was actually quite a challenge to kind of go, well, yeah, so we've got services and we've got development, we've got operations, and by that, the glazing over of, But I think it's really important that we do have a sense of pride in our profession, that we have a definition of our profession, that we are proud and confident and comfortable to be able to stand up at things like this and other events and say, I am a service management professional. And that's what, certainly with ITSMF, we have been trying to do over the last couple of years. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's not the point of the session. It's more about what do we think, what do we actually understand is important in that definition so that we can work on it. Work on it not just from the point of view of our own benefit, but for the organizations that we work in as well. Maybe broaden out that definition to be a much more rounded set of characteristics of what we do. So that's effectively what I'm going to talk about. And sorry, that was the abstract that you've got in the brochure. What does it really mean to be a service management professional? The other thing there, and the one bit of context there is, of course, that we are in this constantly and at the moment ever-changing, fast-changing world in terms of IT, and of course in higher education that world has been changing quite significantly in the last few years as well. So I think it's important that we've got things that we can define and hang on to, because there's lots of new stuff coming in, there's lots of different things coming in. What do we align ourselves to? How do we make sense of all the different models and different concepts and new frameworks and all these kind of things coming in? So that's me. Described earlier on. I do sort of sit on various things in terms of currently working on the rewrite of ITIL. I'm involved with SDI, have been for 30 years, and recently been running ITSMF. Thankfully, I'm not anymore. But we have actually kicked off a little subsidiary company so that we can be a little bit more agile, as they say, a little bit more flexible commercially, Essential SM. So that's really where I sit at the moment, trying to make that work. And the service management framework is one of the ITSMF products, if you like. If you're a member of ITSMF, you can have access to a lot of information about PSMF. I'll come on to that in a second. So it's a few things to talk about: communication, automation, the models, the frameworks that we are constantly being bombarded with in our industry. And particularly, I think, an important one is this whole thing about relationship management. And that's talked about a lot. And again, there's a framework for that. There's a model. It's quite interesting. But if you're already doing ITIL and various other things, how many of these can you actually manage to deal with? I think there's some essential elements in what we do in terms of how we define our professionalism, our competence, our capability, that we should recognize and we should call out, and we should be clear in the people that work for us that they need to have those competencies and capabilities as well. That's an important part of that. So we're kind of moving as an industry from being the guys in the back, the geeks, to being, I guess, like any industry, it evolves. You have an engineering industry, or the airlines or the trains. They started off being quite engineering based. Nowadays you don't actually deal with anybody who's an engineer when you go on a train or a plane. You might hear the pilot on a plane, but that's really there to reassure you. That's part of the presentation. Our business now is about curation, is about managing. We're moving away from the break-fix world that we lived in for the last 20 odd years. And it's more about helping people to do what they need to do and do that successfully as part of our evolution. And what that does is there's a quite considerable skills shortage. There's a lot of people, a lot of jobs available in the industry at the moment, and not enough people to do it. So we have to think again about how we source the right people. And John was talking about hiring a great team. Yes. What is the definition of that? What sort of people can we pull in, maybe with some other complementary skills from the model that we've had in the past? The one that says, yes, you've got to have this kind of technical background, and maybe you've got a badge in one or two of those areas. I don't think that's enough anymore, and we need to call that out. So, the first thing really is just, the world is changing. We have to recognize that. We have to recognize that the definition of our competence needs to be wider, and we need to change. We need to respond to the fact that the world says we need a broader skill set, a wider skill set. You're familiar with the T model of skills. So you have a lot of people across the top who've got a variety of different skills, and then you've got some very, very specialized people deep down. They're the ones that you probably don't let out. You probably don't put them in front of a customer too often, if you can help it. But the challenge, I think, if we're talking about professionalism, really is about staying relevant. How do we keep ourselves relevant? And I do see a lot of organizations that are sort of falling behind on that at the moment, because they're not recognizing that they need to change. And that's not just about digital transformation or DevOps, it's about how they really engage, how they really embrace what their businesses and customers are doing, and how they can play that back in how they operate. So staying relevant is a constant task. It's a great challenge as well, and we have to recognize that. I'm not going to hammer you with lots of stuff about what's changing in the world, because I think you all probably know about that and realize that. But we are living in a very fast-moving environment. Now this, I think, is probably the most important 4 or 5 lines in this session. And it's stuff that I would hope that you would all recognize. It's actually the principles. I was fortunate to be an author on the ITIL Practitioner book a couple of years ago, and there was a section that I wrote on communications. And we came up with some simple, very simple principles about what communication actually is. Communication is a two-way process. Broadcasting is a one-way process. You go like that. Communication means you sense and respond. You get a sense of what the other person, how they react to what you're saying. And actually in the book it does mention that that's what we've always done in IT. If you look at communications protocols, one of my very first courses that I went on was communications protocols. You send a message to another device, and there's a constant checking going on. Have you received it? Are you still there? Yes, 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 ack, all that stuff. That's what we've done in technology for 30, 40 years. We should do the same in our communications, our personal communications. So sending things out just by, I've sent out an email, actually isn't enough. You have to check that it's been received and understood and absorbed and taken on board. And you know, you ask any salesperson about that, oh yeah, we've sent them an email. Actually, no, they will use any opportunity to engage and talk to the people that they're selling to. So they will very often do that thing where they say, just checking that you got the email that we sent you with the proposal. Yeah, fine, good. And then any other opportunity to chat. But we must recognize that communication is a two-way process and that we're communicating all the time. Lots of stuff about body language and tone of voice, all that stuff that I'm sure you've been through before. But again, if you're not really tuned into that, if you're, you know, I've got a 12-year-old who at the moment his communication is, huh? Huh? That's not very good communication from him to us, back, and so on. We have to recognize that what we're doing, the way we're standing, the way we're dressed, and so on, is actually part of that communication process. There's also no single way of communicating. So if you look at advertising, it involves a number of different techniques, billboards, TV, online, lots of different ways of actually reaching different people. And you have to recognize again that some people like email, some people hate it, some people like messaging, some people like social media, some people like face-to-face. And actually the more that you understand about what your co-communicator likes, their preferred way of communicating, the better relationship you'll have. Timing and frequency matter. Don't send out here's our latest all-green SLA report when the system is down. Happens all the time. We've done a great job. No, you haven't. It's not working. But actually choosing the right time to do things and when to do them and keeping on doing them. And the message is in the medium. So actually, if you send something by email, you're actually saying it's not perhaps that important, as opposed to going and talking to somebody or picking up the phone. And I always say, like, well, if you've got a choice, you would speak directly to somebody. It's the best way of communicating, but it's also the most expensive, I suppose. You may not be in the same building, you may not be in the same country, but actually how you choose to communicate with somebody also gives out a message as to what it is you're saying. Now you might be going, well, what's this got to do with professionalism? Well, I think it's got everything to do with professionalism. Our communication skills and our way of dealing with people is absolutely fundamental to what we do in service management, and we should recognize that. I don't think anybody in this room hasn't come across these ideas before. They're not new. But just saying, well, actually communications is right at the center of what we do, and we should recognize it and make sure that our people and those that are 12 years old at the moment and going, that by the time they come into your organization as trainees or apprentices or whatever, that they know that stuff as well. And actually, recently I've had some conversations with people who were saying actually the sort of emotional IQ of people in IT service management seems to be increasing. The sense of understanding this stuff is getting a bit younger. I don't have any data to support that, but I've just had that conversation with a few people who said, yeah, it used to be hiring people in their mid-30s that had life experience and stuff, but actually we've got people in their mid to late 20s who get this stuff a lot better. So that's absolutely central to what we do, and we need to recognize it. I'll come back to that in a second. The next thing is a big challenge to us all. How many of you have got RPA, robotic process automation, working? No surprise there then. But if you read social media, if you read our industry's stuff, it's like everybody's doing it. Everybody's got automated everything. We're all bots, we're all chat bots, and we're all answering everything automatically. I think there is a really important message is that we should embrace automation. We shouldn't be scared of it. It's there, it's going to happen. But two things. One is that the actual level of it is really relatively low at the moment in terms of adoption, but also what people are doing with it. So I do know organizations that use automation in some of their service management processes. It tends to be, if you've got a big workflow like this, it tends to be that. Something that unblocks maybe a triage point or a escalation point where you've got lots of stuff coming in at one time and you've actually got something that can do that very quickly. The point with automation is it's a great opportunity for us to get rid of some of the old rubbish that we've had to deal with for years and freeing us up to do more useful and interesting work. John mentioned, the service portal that they've got at UAL. Many organizations doing that, automating things like request management. It's a kind of a no-brainer, really. Apart from anything else, because so much of that is done external to us, and it's just about getting approval. So we want to have that working. We really need to have that working. But there's too much hype about it. The other thing that the real elephant in the room with this is, if we're going to automate stuff, we've got to have good data. Your CMDB, your knowledge management has got to be perfect. Because if you automate stuff that's wrong, chaos. And that's one bit that just is a little bit, there's the kind of like the small print on when you get stuff written about automation, how it's going to change our lives next week. It's not. It's probably a number of years away. But what it does do, it gives us time to think about, well, what are the bits that we actually do where we add value as human beings? And not just simply, we're not just process monkeys. We're not just sitting there going, yeah, da-da-da, pass it on, da-da-da, fix it, not really adding any value. If a robot can do that, then it probably will be doing it in 5 to 10 years. But at the moment, we're still doing it. And we need to just start to think about, well, where are we going to add the value? For example, if you remove the amount of contact points that you have on your service desk at service management, let's say at the moment, an average person in your organization speaks to somebody in the service desk once a month, 12 times a year. That may reduce to once or twice a year. So you can see that there's a lot of pressure then on that interaction, not just to be okay. You're not going to answer the phone and go, huh? It's got to be excellent. It's got to be really, really good. You think of it more like the way that pilots work now. Most airline pilots, commercial airline pilots, actually don't do very much. They're there to sort it out if it goes wrong. They're there to make you feel comfortable. Probably fly the planes mostly without them, if we really wanted to. But actually, they spend all their time with checklists. Have we got this? Is that right? Making sure that things are correct, that they are safe. And that's, I think, what a lot of the IT of the future will be like. We will have to work with more checklists. But we will be called in to do things less, but when we are, the interaction has got to be brilliant. There's no point saying it's just got to be average or okay. It's got to be brilliant. So that's another challenge. We talked about communication. We talked about how we define ourselves in relation to robots and automation. I think the thing coming out of this, and this is the most popular slide that I've created for the last number of years. Just simply saying we support people, not technology. What we do is about an interaction between human beings. That's actually what we do in service management. So in order to be successful, our success depends on our ability to interact with people and doing that productively, positively, and professionally, all the P's. And that means across teams, beyond IT, with various partners, not thinking, well, these guys are only suppliers, or these guys are only students, or whatever we've thought in the past. Our ability to be successful depends on how good we are at communicating, collaborating, working with people, not just technology. Does anybody disagree with that? Just checking that you're still awake here. But I think we have to with all this stuff, there's nothing drastically new. What I'm just saying is we need to call it out. That's what we do. We interact with people, and that's the measure of our success. Did I have models? Yeah. Then we're on to models, frameworks. How many of you in here are SDI qualified? How many of you in here are ITIL qualified? Ooh. How many of you are BRM qualified? One or two, yeah. And so on. There's, I mean, the list keeps growing. We've got all this stuff that we've been doing for years. ITIL, COBIT, ISO 20000, all the SDI and HDI stuff. Things like TOGAF, enterprise architecture, and so on. But we've got a whole pile of other stuff that's coming in as well, and it's all good. Don't get me wrong, it's all good. But it is quite a challenge in terms of how we absorb and understand and use the best bits. One of the things I think is important in our definition of being professional is to know what these things are and to have a view, maybe not a terribly deep view, but certainly to be able to articulate what they do and where they fit in, because you will get asked about them, or somebody else will come in and say, well, what you've got to do is you've got to be agile, or you've got to, you know, what's your SIAM strategy? And I think that's part of developing our professional knowledge, our learning and so on, and being able to identify, well, actually, SIAM isn't right for us because we don't have that many suppliers. BRM was bits of it, but it's not actually what we do, or BRM is absolutely what we do. IT for IT covers a number of different areas. It's got a slightly different model for what we do in service management. We could be here all day and bore the pants off everybody in here, but I mean, those things are there, and you need to recognize what they are. Things like, I mean, you know, John was talking about the SDI certification program, and just whoever was asking, I'm here all day. If anybody wants to ask anything about that, I'm very happy to explain it in more detail or answer any questions on it. But what that tries to do, and some of these things here, they're all doing much the same stuff, just in different ways. The SDI one is there to try and actually give you some practical guidance on what a service desk should be doing. As John mentioned, it's not just about doing that for its own sake. It's about doing it as part of what you do to improve. So I think knowing what these things are and being able to articulate them and choose the best bits from them, I think is really important. And just BRM in particular, sorry, I keep skipping ahead here. This one I think is quite important. Not necessarily about the BRM Institute stuff, and that's interesting. One of my challenges, I think, and having just been running the ITSMF organization, is that we have the BRM Institute. We have 2 DevOps institutes. There's a Lean Agile Association, so on, as well as SDI, HDI, COBIT, ISACA, all these different things. That's very challenging. It's dissipating from an industry point of view what people do and how we can be effective. What it's done with ITSMF, for example, is it's kind of run it down a little bit, so that it's quite difficult to do very much, you know, run conferences and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that the spend and the interest has gone into other areas has pulled that away. I think the models themselves are interesting, and thinking on how we view our role. It is about relationship management most of the time. It is about having good communication skills. There's some structure in there about where you are from a maturity point of view on the BRMI model, which says you're either a strategic partner or an order taker. And the more integrated you are with the rest of the business that you serve, the more of a strategic partner you are and the more influence you've got. And it's not a great place just to be an order taker. It's like being the Coke salesman in the corner shops. You can't influence, you can't say, well, I'm going to really sell this week. You go and you're given an order for two crates of Coke, and that's it. You've got no influence over that. I think we all know that because digital and because IT is so crucial to everything now, we should have a more senior seat at the table. We should be part of the discussions about what organizations do. And that's a two-way process as well, because we have to step up. We have to be able to use business language. We have to be able to see the bigger picture, not just be thinking about it from an IT perspective. And that's probably why we're not at the table in many cases at the moment. But that's changing. I definitely see that changing. So I think things like this, where I think you can look at a model like BRM and the others, DevOps. Some of you, I mean, I've done the DevOps and ITSM workshop a couple of times now for UCISA. It's about picking bits out, and saying, well, actually, yeah, we understand it's about making work visible, DevOps. It's about flow, improving flow. It's about doing things more quickly. It's about the culture. We can grab all that. We don't need to go on a training course. We don't need to have a certification. We could just pull those things out. From the professionalism point of view, we might want to do the training course and have the certification, but I think because there are so many of them now, it's actually quite challenging. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying that's part of the challenge, is that there's so many of them now. It's like, where do I go? Do I do DevOps? Do I do this? Do I do that? So I think just coming on to sort of round up where we are, we need to look at our skills. We need to say, what is it that we need to develop as people to really broaden out our professionalism and competency. And I don't think any model, any framework, I don't think any particular training program is going to give you that. The professional is one that looks at a number of different things and pulls the best bits and maybe focuses in on one or two, but actually with the awareness of what's in the others, pulls out those best bits. And I think our focus really has got to be on communications, personal interaction, leadership, influence, business skills, organization, facilitation, all those kind of things, because that's what we are actually going to be judged on. We are judged on our ability to interact successfully with people across a number of different departments. That's what we do in service management. Now, if you disagree, that's fine, and ask questions at the end or now, but that's what I think that we do. We're going to have more automation, so our chances to have those interactions are probably being squeezed. But when we do have those interactions, they've got to be absolutely great. One of the things that's always annoyed me is when we talk about soft skills. Yeah? And actually soft skills are the hard ones, I think. They're the difficult ones. And we talk about them as if they were kind of a bit fluffy. Soft skills add into that. But if you're hiring two people, if you're hiring somebody and you've got two people with the same qualifications and experience, which one do you hire? The one with the better soft skills or communication skills. And there's a list here of things I think that we could call soft skills, but they really are difficult. And none of them really there about being technical as such. They're the hard bit. They're the bit that we're paid to do. Building relationships, having customer relationship. The relationship is so important. I'll give you an example of that. Recently, an event I was running, we had a bit of a crisis the day before it with one of our partners, and there was a real challenge in terms of, was it going to happen? And one of the things that really helped us to get it solved was the fact that I had a good relationship with that organization. People at the top of that organization, they phoned me up, they said, can we look at this? And because we had a good relationship, both I and they wanted to fix it right away. If it had gone through a process, if it had gone through somebody relatively junior in their organization raising a ticket and passing it to somebody else and somebody else, by the time it had got to me, it could have been over. So we've had the delay, but also it could have been completely misappropriated by the time it had actually got to me. Because we had a good relationship, I was able to go, right, okay, how are we going to fix this? Because that's the first thing. I want to maintain the relationship. We've got a problem. We'll sort that out. And that to me is the thing that completely overrides SLAs. You've got SLAs. to manage expectations, but the customer relationship is way, way more important than that. The SLAs won't kill the relationship, but you've got to have the relationship working in the first place. And if you've got the relationship working, you could argue, do we really need SLAs, or certainly in the traditional model? Communication skills, business knowledge, being able to write a business case, being able to do risk management. I mean, it's fundamental business capability that, again, tends to be done very, very, very patchily across the organizations. Dealing with difficult people, dealing with resistant people. How many of you have to do that? Where is that written on your job description? Where is that written on your...
Written in the bit at the bottom that says, and anything else that we
Yeah. So this stuff needs to be out. This needs to be on. I mean, some of it's quite difficult to nail down, but you can nail it down to communication, written and oral skills, be able to write a business case. There's a number of things in there. How about this one? Standing up to experienced technical people who think they're right because they see it only from the technical perspective or their little silo perspective, whereas you've actually got a much wider, broader business view, business perspective on this. Getting agreement, calming people down, keeping up to date with new models, procurement, and that's a great skill that we have very patchily. And managing finance. That's the bit in ITIL that nobody actually does. I mean, there is financial management of IT services. How many of you do that from your ITIL background? I was waiting for John to put his hand up there. So we need to recognize, is this meaningful to you? Did you actually see that these things are what we do and that's what's important? That's what really defines us. Otherwise, we are just sort of, we've got some technical knowledge or we've done our badges, which only really talk about process. I can't really tell you exactly what the new ITIL is going to look like, but certainly there'll be things that you recognize that are totally can't change that much because they have worked for a long time. It's the context, it's the business context of how we can in some way elevate what we do with our broader set of skills that will set it apart. Okay, so relationships depend on this. Communication working well, and I think in terms of our business relationships, it's a two-way process. Proximity and intimacy. If you're working closely with people, you do start to get more understanding of them as people. You may have, if you've got contractual arrangements, you may have some things that you only and they only know about, but it does mean that you are then much more bound into working with them and communicating positively with them. We need to be creative. We need to understand who it is we work for. The thing that has bothered me for the last 20 years is when we say, I work in IT. That's what I like about UCISA, is that you are very clear that you work in a particular sector, particular industry. You're all very proud about that. You go elsewhere, I know very few other sectors that have that same focus on saying, we are in higher education, we share with our friends across the country. People tend to be a little bit embarrassed to say, well, I work I work for an insurance company, or I work for, I don't know, whatever it is, unless they are very much part of the culture. I've been doing some work with a company called Games Workshop at the moment, who are a gaming organization, and pretty much everybody there has got, not just tattoos, but piercing through every part of their body. But they're all bought into that culture. They live and breathe that culture. They like the organization. It's very, very refreshing because it means that they are bound into the business that they are supporting. They're not just there to work in IT. We don't just work in IT. We work with people and relationships. That's what we do. Attitude and positivity can't be digitized. Gosh, I was on fire when I wrote that. But it's true. The bits that are valuable, the bits that we actually deliver value on, are about how we engage with people. Are we positive? Do we have the right attitude? People want can-do people. They don't want people that say no. And that's one of our biggest challenges, I think. So how do we move on? How do we get to this world where we're all communicating better? Well, there's lots of models out there. This is the one that we've come up with over the last couple of years in ITSMF. And it has, if you like, 6 pillars with it. I'm not going to go into massive detail right now, but here today, I have got stuff I can give people that explains it. It's called Professional Service Management Framework. The clue is in the title. It's trying to bring out clarity about how you understand your organization and marketplace. Yes, you need to be technical, and yes, you need to understand vital and similar models. But just as important are your relationship skills, your leadership skills. And that's not just being a manager, that's just how you demonstrate creativity, innovation, positivity, and are able to inspire others, influence others. And some general business management skills, just about how do you run a meeting, how do you organize stuff, how do you write stuff up, what's the best way to present. I am constantly horrified at the quality of some writing that gets produced. And I'm not going to get into why that is, but we definitely need to make it clear to people that there's a certain standard about how you do things, how you present stuff, because again, communication is a two-way process and it's happening all the time. So if you present something that's not written very well or is not terribly well thought through, or the medium is wrong, it's not going to have the impact. One very simple question: what do you think is the most effective means of communication? It's the best way. If I have to transfer a piece of knowledge to Sally. Talking. Face to face. Bit more than that, sorry?
It depends on the person.
It does, yeah. So if I know that Sally doesn't like to talk to people, then I'm going to send her a note. But it's actually more than just face to face. The best way of imparting a piece of information is to tell a story. This is where you think, oh, he's lost it now. He's gone all Californian on us. But I mean that seriously, because when I'm just putting up data, let's just say that there's 5 bullets. How many of you would remember that in 10 minutes? I'll ask you just before we finish. When you tell a story, you have to recreate it in your brain. So actually your brain works a lot harder. I think it's about 6 times harder. There's more synapse activity. So it's much more likely to land and stick than if you just fire data at people. Now, why am I saying that? Well, because you've got to communicate to your organization. You've got to get messages out. So maybe you can't do it all face-to-face, but you can do it in a way that's creative and it forces people to think a little bit more. I mentioned earlier about the instance I had with the event and the partner and so on. That was me telling you something, and I guess you'll probably remember that. I mean, things like, for example, things like reporting. And here's a little story. When I was a service manager, this tells you how long ago it was, I used to do a monthly report which actually got printed and passed around to people in the department. And I was just about to go on holiday this one particular day, and I had written out instructions for the people that were looking after my dog. And it was all sorts of things like, this is where it goes in the park to do a number 2, and all sorts of things like that. It was kind of embarrassing stuff. And getting everything ready, and the guy that was working for me compiled all the stuff, and he went and he got it printed and he put it around everybody's desks. I was just about to go and I thought, where's that? I printed off that sheet with the dog instructions. I said, where's that? He said, oh, was that the sheet that was on your desk? I thought, yeah. That's That's been photocopied on the bottom of the report. So we had this mad rush of going round and trying to pull all these reports back off people's desks. We didn't get them all. Guess what? Sorry? Nobody noticed. That's when I thought, maybe my report's a bit boring. Nobody, and then of course it made it clear that nobody actually read the blooming thing. So I kind of thought, well, what's the best way to, so I thought of other ways of, getting, and if you've got one piece of information, if it's just a number, or it's a yes, no, or a rag or whatever, that's all you need to send. We do get a little bit carried away sometimes providing too much information, so people don't see what the important bit is. It's really annoying if you ask somebody to do something and they provide you with a pile of data, and you've then got to, I just want to know what the number is. Just tell me that, or what, is it yes or no, or what's the answer? That way is actually more effective. Now, there's a little story there. I'm pretty confident most of you will remember. Might ask you when I'm on the panel later, how many of you remember about the reports and the dog? But if you're thinking about it, how are you going to communicate to your staff, to your colleagues, to your customers, to other people in the business? Think about how you communicate, because that's a core part of what you actually do. So this stuff here, as I say, if you're a member of ITSMF, or we can provide that. What we've tried to do with this is provide something where there's learning guides and there's definitions of, I think we've got here, just core competence as a service management associate in terms of understanding the marketplace. You can describe the marketplace in which your company and services operate. As a professional, you have to be able to present that and show how that fits together. That's just an example. But I think it's important that we do recognize that we need to have this bigger picture as the Leviathan. It's a much bigger definition of who we are. And that means that we can start to bring in people. Maybe they don't have so much of this, but if they are good at that, if you've managed people, if you've produced information to people, if you have led and influenced people, if you've run a pub or a hotel, or you've worked in another area, then you've got completely complementary skills. You can certainly learn this stuff, and you can probably learn enough about the technical stuff. We've always talked about this. We've always talked about how do we broaden it. I know Sally, for example, who spoke at our awards recently, the whole thing, and we'll talk in the panel about opening up our industry to a much broader, more diverse group of people. That's not just about gender and culture and so on. It is about types of people as well, from different backgrounds, from different working backgrounds. They will be, if you go on EasyJet now, nobody that you actually interact with is any kind of expert on aviation. I would hope that the pilots are. You could argue that. But what we are doing is we are interacting with people, we're collaborating with people, we're communicating with people. That's what we do, and we need to reflect it. Other things that we can do. This is one of my favorite. I'm not big on business books. I think most business books have got a couple of pages that are really interesting, and then it's flannel. But this one, and the approach of how you build teams. John was talking about building a good team. If in a team, the things that make teams work are dealing with these issues. Lack of trust, fear of conflict. So I should be calling out one of my colleagues who's not done something, because it's not just about me and them, it's about the whole team and the delivery of the team. Commitment, accountability, and inattention to results. Now you can work through all that stuff with the Lencioni stuff. It's really, really good. I recommend it. Anybody here use it? Yeah. It's a way of pulling these things together and getting people committed to, they've got their personal professionalism, and then they can extend that to their team's professionalism. I think the new service manager is doing these things, none of which are new necessarily, but having business knowledge, having contractual supplier, commercial management, marketing, communication. Nobody goes into IT. I mean, Nobody goes into IT to be a marketing professional. I think we all get that. But I think if we have to think of the industry slightly differently, it's entering a different phase. There's a book called The Quantum Age of IT. I don't know if anybody's read that, Charlie Araho, where he says IT is now in the retail phase. We are a service supply chain business. Like it or not, that's what we do. Service management is absolutely at the forefront of that. Anybody that tells you that service management is not a big part of that doesn't really know what they're talking about, to be honest. And we're not going to be taken over by robots, not for another couple of years anyway. The other one, really important, is the new CIO. Not the guy who used to be a programmer and hides away in his office or her office. Somebody who's out there, who's a business-driven person, hopefully at the executive level, able to influence business people, is willing to challenge and disrupt their own organization because it needs it, in line with some of the Lencioni stuff. We're not paying any attention to the results. What we're doing with the data. I was with an organization yesterday that had fantastic data. Nobody was paying any attention to it. They've got to be able to demonstrate value. They've got to develop this idea of sense and respond and be clear that IT can't do everything. The traditional IT organization can't do everything. I'm seeing more and more of these people coming through, and not the sort of traditional, well, I've been here for 30 years and I used to write all the systems. That's not probably the ideal model in terms of having somebody who can do this. But I'm seeing more organizations that are putting IT heads on boards and being part of the executive and recognizing, moving away from the idea that, well, that's something that it's quite fashionable that we don't understand IT. It's a responsibility of executives of any organization to make sure that IT technology, because it's so fundamental now, is run properly. Have a look at ISO 38500. It explains it all very well and very succinctly. So we have the new service manager, we have the new CIO, all those kind of things. Rounding off our professionalism, IT involves technical disciplines, but IT is a business function. We need to embrace the business side of what we do, particularly business is really about communication, collaboration, that's what it is. And think about that T-shaped model and think about these things as much as technology. Do you have any questions?
Andy's ready to run for your questions. Any questions?
Hi. I can't remember exactly. I think it was slide 3. You talked about removing access points to your organisation.
About what? Sorry, I missed that.
Removing access points to your organisation. So I think you were talking about, reducing the ways people can communicate with your service desk. Surely there's a balance between, sort of offering high quality single points of communication and offering the world, multiple ways to access your service desk. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm certainly not promoting the idea that we remove access. I think ideally, and I think we all said it earlier, the best way to communicate is face-to-face. So anything in a perfect world would be done face-to-face. But it's also the most expensive, time-consuming, and in many cases difficult thing to do. We've kind of, with the whole service desk industry, I think, and I think that industry is in a very good place now because it's come through, it's identified its value, it has a number of disciplines about how to do it well, and it is rising in terms of its profile, both within IT and within businesses. So taking it away is a real risk, absolutely. I'm not in any way suggesting that that's a strategy, but there are things that we currently do in service desks that we probably should have eliminated a long time ago, like password resets, like a lot of just relatively low-level tasks. So actually automating them is a benefit because you speed it up. You automate request management, you know, what we're doing there, we're taking an order for something, we're writing down a few, and then we have to go back because we didn't get all the details, or it then sits in somebody's inbox for 2 weeks. Whereas actually if we automate it and say, well, we have X number of standard requests that just go through like that. That's surely a bit, and that's what people complain. Why does it take 6 weeks to get something that I know only takes seconds? So it is finding the balance, I think, and not removing that. I know one organisation that just decided that they were going to do everything through a portal without consulting with their customers, and they really didn't get a very good response on that. And they were saying, "Oh, we're doing it in order to save money." No, actually, the focus nowadays is on quality of service, not just about saving money and sweating assets.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I think at UCA we're about to do that. We're about to switch off email and use a portal. And my sort of hope is that people, if they can't find the information, they'll pick up the phone and ring us. It's whether that you feel that's appropriate, or do people just want to be able to send emails?
What's your relationship with them?
In terms of...
I mean, have you discussed it with them? Is it something that's...
Yeah, we just, you know, get various feedback.
Yeah.
I think we have to sort of almost suck it and see, really.
Yeah, I mean, just cutting it off is, you know, it's cold turkey, it's risky. Depends on the demographic as well. If you've got a relatively young customer base that you're doing that with, they might just accept it better than, you know, the older generation.
Very keen to maybe open up a chatbot or something like that. I think that might work. I don't know.
I mean, the thing is, email has got an emotional link, and people see it as a, you know, as a soft toy that they hang on to. It's a bit of a crutch, but I think we have to move on from it. I mean, it's just if you've got the relationship and you're able to go and discuss with them and say this is why, and it's better, and you've got more visibility, it's more transparent, you get better feedback, you know, then they might still not like it, but at least you're socializing it with them and getting them on board with you. If you just do it and don't talk to them about it, you might have a few interesting... Well, you won't get any emails, will you?
No. That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. Well done.
I think we had one question lurking at the back, so
Yeah.
if we could just have that question,
Okay.
please.
Hi Barclay, I'm Henrik Broger from Queen Mary University of London. One thing you said really resonated with me, and that is I've spent pretty much all my career saying I work in IT, but now I say I work in higher education. I think, how many people can recognise that? I think that's really true, because we do feel much more collaborative and we work much better together. That's certainly my experience from 4 years in it. First part of your presentation, you talked about the change in IT, and it's a conversation I only had on Monday about where we're going. It was about cloud services and so on and so forth. How much do you think, and that's just about higher education, that business IT are taking this on board, about the change, about the need to be different, about the need to hire different people, think of a different business model?
It's very patchy. I'd say that, you know, I do know organisations that have embraced it, but they tend to be in the minority still. I think many organisations, the majority of organisations that I do engage with, and particularly through ITSM and SDI, that's right across the industry, and you know, thousands of them, really. Everybody, the discussion is going on. I think we're at the, where are we with this? How do we find a way through? Not much has actually changed. I had a discussion the other day on, there's a Facebook page called Back to ITSM, which is non-aligned with anybody, and it's very interesting because you get lots of people discussing stuff on that. I encourage you all to join it. But it was about, you know, what's the actual level of DevOps adoption in organizations? Still really, 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 really low. But most organizations are dipping their toe in it. They're doing something with it. They're actually not doing it very well because they're just doing it as a separate thing where it's meant to be Dev and Ops. Same with automation. Everybody's talking about it. So I think we're still at the, you know, getting towards forming stage as opposed to being high adopters of all those things. But I think it's important that we think about it and we do start to take steps about what our role and position is, because in many cases the traditional jobs that we've had in IT or IT technology will either go or will change. And that doesn't mean to say that there won't be work in technology in business. It's just more that it's more absorbed into what we do. And we all just need to recognize that, I think. And the new generation coming through, what we call the millennial, they get that. They don't even, it's not even a question for them. It's just something that it's just part of what they do. My younger son, who's 8, came into my office the other day and he said, why are you using Chrome, Daddy, to browse? I was like, because, well, he said, you should use Mozilla Firefox. It's got much better security, it loads the frames much faster. He's 8. He doesn't care about IT or the IT industry, or, you know, it's just part of what he does.
Does he use Google or DuckDuckGo?
So that's the world that we're moving in, and I think our legacy and passing on to the next generations, we have to call this stuff out, and we have to recognize that the business that we're in, there was a lot of hype maybe about 5 years ago about how actually for many of us we'd have been quite unique because we'd have seen the birth and death of an industry. Because there's a lot of talk about IT disappearing within a couple of years. Nonsense. But it did actually start to raise the question, well, what do we do? Who are we? And the models that we've developed organically over the last 30 years with our operations silos and our various groups and our development silos, that has got to change. And it's not happening absolutely everywhere at the moment, but it will come.
What do you think the big problem is? Is it senior management, or is it, as you say, the new people that come in absolutely get it, and I absolutely get that. I do think that the issue is mainly with potentially senior leadership. It's also in certain pockets within IT departments. I think rightly so, people in infrastructure departments potentially will be questioning their role going forwards.
Yeah, and you know, there's a certain level of protectionism there, there's a certain level of fear there. We have to, by calling it out and making it clear that that's what professionalism is, then it is opening it up, it is being transparent. And there's some people that we won't take on the journey with us. But I think for the majority of people in IT, we have to just recognize that, yeah, that's the way that we're going.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I was just going to say, I'm going to be here all day today, so if anybody wants to chew the fat about that or about SDC or ITSM or anything, please just come and ask me.
Fantastic. If we could give them another